today, and today I'm going to be making chicken and dumplings. This is one of my favorite dishes, especially when the weather starts to get a little cold, and it definitely will feed a lot of people and it will fill you up. For ingredients, you will need 10 chicken drumsticks, 2 onions chopped, 3 stalks of celery diced, and in a bowl together, you can mix a tablespoon and a half of salt and a tablespoon of pepper. And then I have my secret ingredient that I'm going to share with you guys today. I use a chicken bouillon powder packet, 1. Then you will be making your own dough from scratch. So you will need 2.5 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, 2 cups of chicken broth, and a stick and a half of butter. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add our 10 chicken drumsticks to the pot. You can then go ahead and add in all of your chopped ingredients. The onions are going in first. Get all of those there. We are then adding in the 3 stalks of celery. You can sprinkle in your salt and pepper over those ingredients. You can add the chicken bouillon packet. And then you can also drop in your stick of butter. Next, you want to fill up the pot until all of the chicken is covered. You will then turn on the stove, and you can use a medium-high heat, giving your chicken and all of the ingredients a stir. We want to get the pot up to boiling, and then we will reduce this to medium heat and let it simmer for about 30 minutes until it is done. All right. In the meantime, after we get this to simmer and we start to wait on this for about 25 to 30 minutes, we will go ahead and start on our dumplings from scratch. Remember that, dumplings from scratch. You're going to learn it here. All right, so now that we have our chicken drumsticks simmering for about the next 30 minutes, we're going to take that time to make our dumplings from scratch. I'm excited. So here we go. Okay, so as far as things that you will need to get started, you will need a large clear surface, clean clear surface, where we can actually prepare or roll out the dough that we will be making, and then cut it into squares, rectangles. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need a surface that's large enough to work from. You will also need flour, so I brought out my flours because we'll need to dust the surface and make sure things don't start to stick together. You'll need a rolling pin, which will also dust with flour. You will need a sharp knife, and make sure that your surface is something that you can definitely slide a knife or a pizza cutter on. I'm going to be using a pizza cutter. You will need also a baking pan or a cookie sheet, and I have parchment paper on it, just folded because we will be storing the dumplings there and refrigerating them until we're ready to add them to our dish. So with all of that being said, let's get started. So you already have your 2.5 cups of flour. Now we're just going to add that teaspoon of salt. Take a fork and just mix it in Get it all evenly kind of put into the mix here. And then if you remember that half a stick of butter melted, so that's about 4 to 5 tablespoons of butter. We're going to add that to it now. And then we're going to continue to mix these ingredients in with our fork. Make sure you have a large enough bowl to handle this. Because the next step is we'll be gradually adding in the 2 cups of chicken broth. All right, so we pretty much have all of the butter absorbed. So now we'll start taking a little bit of the chicken broth, and I'll say pour in about half first. So pour in about a cup to start, and then you can stir it for a little while with your fork, but then make sure your hands are clean or that you're wearing gloves, because we're going to actually start to mix this. And I wanted to mix it by hand and not use my KitchenAid mixer for this, because I wanted to show you guys how easy it is to make without having the KitchenAid mixer. But I didn't say it wasn't going to be messy. So you will start picking up the flour and actually kind of kneading it together with your hands. You're wanting to pick up all the flour in the bowl, but you don't want to put too much liquid in. But it's okay if you mess up. You can continue to add flour if you add too much of the broth, or you can continue to add broth until you have enough to where you're picking up the flour and it's not sticking to your hands. So again, this requires a little work. Now you may not need the whole 2 cups of chicken broth, so I would again put half of what's left into the bowl and see if that will be all you need. But again, if you put too much chicken broth in, know that you can always add more flour. All right, and that just about does it for the amount of flour that I have. If you guys can see, yes, my hands are messy, but the consistency, you want it to be where you can work with it and it's not sticking to your hand as much. If it's sticking to your hand, just roll it around a little bit more in the flour. Sometimes in the process, when I know I have it just about right, I might have to rinse my hands to clean them off a little bit and then dry them really well, and then return back to the dough. But this is just about at the consistency that we're looking for. It's a little damp on one side. So I'm gonna keep flipping it and tossing it around to pick up the rest of what I have in the bowl. Hey, it's messy, but it's also fun. So you can kind of just start folding within each other. And if you needed to do something, once it's ready, because we're pretty much ready with this, it's not sticking anymore. My hands are just messy and you can't tell it's not sticking, but you'll be able to tell that for your own it's not sticking. But once you have your flour and it's pretty much ready, all good, you can wash your hands and let this rest for just a second. Not that it needs much rest, but then we'll start to prepare our table. All right, so now that we have our surface clean and dry really well, it is time for us to add a little flour. So scoop out a little flour, sprinkle it or pour it out on your countertop. Smooth it around with your hands. Again, this is one of those where you can't be too nice in the kitchen, as they say, or too clean in the kitchen as far as getting your hands dirty. So go ahead and just dive in to spreading the flour all over, and this is so that as you roll it out, the dough will not stick to the countertop or to the rolling pin, as we're going to add a little more flour, dust it with flour as well. Ooh, and I can just smell the goodness coming from the chicken, the boiling chicken. I can just smell it. So now we're ready for the flour, and you don't want to use all your dough at one time. So maybe taking a cup, about a cup at a time would be good. So I would suggest about this much. We want to put it on the counter and kind of press it out. I call this the adult version of Play-Doh. My children love Play-Doh, so, or did, I should say. So now you just take your rolling pin and you want to kind of just roll it out all directions. We're not looking to make a pizza, so we're not looking to make a circle per se. We're just wanting to have a flat evenness from our dough. We don't want a fluffy dough for this particular dumpling. So I'm looking for a flat dough. And just roll it out as much as possible. If you feel like things are getting sticky again, just add more flour to your rolling pin and then just continue to roll it out. Again, does not have to be in any kind of shape, but you kind of start from the middle and work your way out, working your way around the different corners to flatten out the dough. This is actually I love making pizzas for this very reason. I just love playing with dough and rolling it out using my rolling pin. All right, so now that we have it pretty flat and thin, a good surface there, we're actually going to take a little bit more flour at this point, and we're just going to sprinkle it a little bit over the top of your dough, and then spread it around with your fingers or with your hands. And this is so that it won't stick together once it is stacked, because we're going to be stacking it together. And then take your knife or your I'm using a pizza cutter today, and you just want to make nice squares or rectangles out of this. Again, this does not have to be perfect, so you can go wider on some portions, thinner on others. I actually love having a variety of different sizes of my dumplings. So, you can go again shorter. You can make rectangles. I haven't been creative and made any triangles or anything like that out of it, but the purpose here is just so that it's not anything that is time consuming. It's easy. It does not have to be perfect. So now that you have it all cut, you can start taking your pieces, starting with the larger ones, I guess, and just stacking them on each other. Picking them up and stacking them one at a time on top of each other. And again, so you're picking it up off your countertop, and if you have dusted the countertop well with flour, it should not be sticking at this point. If you're having a tough time, you can always pick it back up and redust your surface, roll it back into a ball, and start over. But I want to also show you here that I am just taking it and stacking them on each other, on top of each other. So we will keep a surface here as I continue to pick my dough up and stack them on top of each other. Stack them on top. They don't have to be pretty. They're all different sizes. If you're a perfectionist though, feel free to take your time and measure them out. If you feel like some are just too small, you can also put that back in with your other dough and roll it back out in the next batch. I have a section here that didn't want to come up from, so I didn't have enough flour. I don't think I had enough flour in that section, but it's okay. I added it back to the pot, and I will re-roll that out on the next one. All right, so now that we've finished rolling out our dough, we have it all stacked. I'm actually going to cover this with the folded parchment paper, put it in the refrigerator until we need it, and then I'll get everything cleaned up on my surface. And once the chicken is ready, after it's been cooking for about 30 minutes, we'll head over there and I'll show you what to do next. Now, here's also a little secret. When you're wanting to show off like you've really been doing something in the kitchen, because this meal is going to make everybody think that, you can go ahead and douse a little bit of this flour on your face, and they'll think, oh gosh, they have put in the work today. All right, so have fun with it. See you in a second. Delicious. That broth and that chicken smells delicious. We can stir across the sides here, make sure all of our salt and pepper, or pepper at this point, are coming back down into the broth. But everything looks ready. It's been cooking 30 minutes, so now it is ready to take out. We're gonna pull all of the chicken out and let it cool for a little while, because we'll need to separate the chicken from the bones. So you don't want to do that while it's hot. Try to keep all of your celery and items in the pot. Some people strain those out, but I like to keep the flavor in those in the pot for my dumplings. Fish around and make sure you have all of that and any skin that may have fallen off. After removing the chicken, you can tell if you need maybe a little more chicken broth. So I do, but for the amount that I'm trying to make. So I'm going to add in a little bone broth that I have. And again, you can also add water and add the bones from the drumsticks back into the mix and let it boil and give that flavor to the water that you're adding in. But I'm looking at just about a half of pot there, and that should be plenty to hold my chicken and the dumplings itself and give us enough juice to go around. So I'm going to keep the heat at medium, let that go back up to a good simmer, and in the meantime I'm going to pull the chicken off of the bones. All right, so we're coming back to check on our broth. We have gotten that to simmer for another few minutes to make sure that bone broth that I added, again, you could just add water, you could add regular chicken broth, you could add the bones from the you could add the bones from the chicken drums back to it to season that water again, and then to pull them out before we start on this next process. But now that we have about a half of pot of the chicken broth ready and it's simmering, we want to begin to lay in our dumplings that we've pulled from the refrigerator. And you want to do this one at a time, just adding them in one at a time at different parts in the pot. Place them in. You can increase your temperature just a little bit. I have it just over medium so that we don't lose the simmer that we have going on. But again, you don't want to drop more than one in at a time because they could stick together. But just one at a time, different placements. If you're using a non-stick, right now you do not have to worry about them sticking to the bottom of the pot. if you are using a pot that is not non-stick, you may have to check by stirring them a little bit until you're sure that this coated pot will not stick. They won't stick to this. Once they start floating, that is when you know that they are done, that those are done. So just keep adding them to the pot here. One at a time. Add them in. That one seems to have gotten stuck on us somehow, but it's okay. Once you see them float to the top, you know that they are done, that those are done. And you know what? You may not need all of the dumplings that you made. If you feel like, okay, this is more than my pot can necessarily handle, you can stop adding them at that time. But even while they're floating to the top, try to find a little open space that you can still drop the newly added ones in to as well. So just find you some open space in between there. Pull them apart again, one at a time. And the smell again is just so delicious. It smells delicious. You can take a second and give your pot a stir in the middle of dropping these in, just so you can find some more placement room for more. And I love dumplings, and my family does too, so I don't think we can have too many. I'm gonna keep adding. Keep adding. Again, do not add more than one in at a time. Find those openings. Find those openings in that broth in your pot. Space, feel free to give it a soft stir. And keep adding. Make it to put in all of mine this time, because I did make quite a bit after rolling it out and cutting them up. So a few more, and I think that that's going to be the max for what I can add. All right, so now we're ready to add back in our pulled chicken. So we've taken the chicken out of the bone, and we're just going to add it back to the pot. I like to get every little juice and every little piece back in. And once everything is added, that was our final ingredient. So we will just stir that, and we're going to let this simmer all together for another 10-15 minutes. And we'll be ready to plate and serve. All right, so just that quick, you guys have completed your own chicken and dumplings. It was just that simple. But literally from beginning to end, it should only take about an hour and a half with prep time and everything to 2 hours, depending on if you are substituting in some of those natural ingredients, like using the chicken broth from the drumsticks, because you'll have to wait till that is done and pour over the 2 cups. But all in all, this is a really simple dish and it goes a long way. So I'm going to go ahead and start plating. I give it a good stir. Dip it over into the bowl. Get me plenty of noodles and add my broth. And voila. And again, I just dip from the bottom. Make sure I get plenty of the dumplings. Add the broth. And voila. Alright, so there you have it. We've plated 2 servings so far. I got a couple more to make for today's dinner. And I will say that I really enjoy cooking it. I always do. And I hope you had as much fun playing in the dough. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And until next time, time to eat.